Okay, so get ready to dig in as we're diving deep into the world of cricket farming. And no, I'm not talking about that chirping you hear in your backyard during those warm summer nights. We're going beyond those evening serenades to uncover the surprisingly sophisticated world of farming crickets. Think sustainable protein raised with a level of precision that might just surprise you.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Our guide for this deep dive is the FAO's Guidance on Sustainable Cricket Farming Manual. It's a pretty fascinating read. And honestly, it's way more interesting than any textbook I've ever cracked open on farming, or honestly anything else for that matter.
Well, and what's fascinating to me is that this isn't some niche movement anymore. This manual is designed to elevate the entire cricket farming industry globally, especially as the demand for eco-friendly protein sources just continues to explode.
Yeah, you're telling me. And it's not just a few backyard enthusiasts anymore either. Get this. In Thailand alone,
Oh.
over 20,000 farms are raising crickets. 20,000. Can you imagine?
Wow.
But for any image you have of like a swarm of crickets in someone's basement, we're talking meticulously organized, climate-controlled spaces, almost like cricket condos.
They really are incredibly sophisticated, and the FAO knows that as this industry grows, standardization is going to be key, especially when it comes to food safety. This manual is providing a blueprint for farmers all over the world.
That makes a lot of sense. So first things first, the manual dives deep into choosing the right location for your cricket empire. And it's not as simple as you might think. For example, setting up shop downwind from a factory. Not ideal for these little guys.
Yeah. Nope. Location is absolutely crucial. The manual emphasizes avoiding any risk of contamination. Things like industrial runoff or pesticides drifting over from nearby farms. It's all about ensuring that the crickets are healthy, which of course impacts the quality and safety of the final product.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Nobody wants their cricket flour power bar with a side of toxins. And speaking of those cricket condos we mentioned, this is where my mental picture of a cricket farm gets totally flipped on its head.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Like I always picture these swarms of crickets just kind of going crazy, but
Yeah, just a big pile of crickets.
yeah, exactly.
But it's really not like that at all. It's much more organized. Think of it this way. Would you want to live in a cramped, dirty apartment? Of course not. Well, crickets aren't much different. The manual stresses the importance of spacious, well-ventilated rearing pens. And get this, they even have special blinds made from stacked egg cartons.
Wait, egg cartons, like the ones from the grocery store. Who knew they had a side hustle?
It's amazing, isn't it? It's a technique that was pioneered in Thailand over 20 years ago and has since been adopted around the world. The crickets love to hide in the compartments, which actually helps prevent overcrowding and reduces the spread of disease. Plus, it's a brilliant use of a readily available and inexpensive material.
Talk about a win-win. Okay, so we've got the housing situation figured out, but now I'm curious about the amenities. What do crickets even drink? Do they have tiny juice boxes?
Not quite juice boxes, but
Mm,
they do need access to fresh, clean water just like any living creature. The challenge is preventing drowning, which, believe it or not, is a major concern.
really? I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, it's a real thing. The manual describes two main types of specialized water dispensers. One uses a shallow dish with a ramp so the crickets can easily access the water without falling in. The other uses a wicking system where the water is drawn up through a porous material. It's actually a method adapted straight from chicken farming, which I find pretty clever.
So we're talking high-tech hydration stations for these little guys. It's amazing how much thought goes into creating the optimal environment for them to thrive.
And just like that, we've got our cricket farm up and running, but now we need to talk about the stars of the show, the crickets themselves.
Let's hear it.
Raising these little critters is a lot like guiding your kids through school.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So picture this. It all starts with those tiny eggs, like little cricket kindergartners just starting their journey.
Oh, how cute.
Then comes the nymph stage, like awkward growth spurts and shedding those exoskeletons like they're outgrowing their school uniforms every other week.
I can practically see them stuffing those molted exoskeletons in their tiny lockers.
Exactly. And finally, they reach adulthood wings, mating calls, the whole shebang. It's graduation day at Cricket High.
Love it. And like any good student, I imagine these growing crickets need a balanced diet to fuel their journey. What do these mini gourmands like to munch on?
That's where things get really interesting. Just like you might pack your kids a variety of snacks, crickets need a diverse diet to thrive. And what's remarkable is the manual's emphasis on using affordable, locally sourced feed. Take cassava pulp, for example.
Cassava pulp, as in the leftover stuff from making tapioca.
You got it. It's a byproduct that might otherwise go to waste.
Right.
But it turns out to be a nutritional gold mine for crickets.
So not only are we raising a sustainable protein source, but we're also finding clever ways to reduce food waste.
Exactly.
Talk about a double win.
And here's the kicker. The manual states that using alternatives like cassava pulp can slash feed costs by up to 50% compared to conventional cricket feed.
Wow, 50%.
That's huge for farmers, especially those just starting out.
That's massive. It's like sending your kid to college on a half-price scholarship. But all this talk about food has me wondering, what about the output of all those crickets?
Oh, yes. Get ready for this. Cricket droppings, or frass, as it's technically called, are like black gold for gardeners.
No.
Oh, yeah. It's a natural, nutrient-rich fertilizer that's in high demand.
So we're not just talking about sustainable protein. We're talking about a closed-loop system where even the waste is valuable. I love it.
Precisely. And this ties into a major theme throughout the manual minimizing environmental impact at every stage. It encourages farmers to utilize every single part of the cricket, further reducing waste and maximizing efficiency.
Okay, I have to admit this whole sustainable cricket farming thing is way more complex and frankly impressive than I ever imagined. But let's be real. At the end of the day, these crickets are being raised for human consumption. We've got to talk about food safety, right?
Absolutely. And this is where the manual's expertise truly shines. It dedicates an entire section to biosecurity, emphasizing that healthy crickets equal happy customers. In fact, it even goes as far as to say that you can tell a lot about a cricket farm just by looking at the farmer's boots.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah.
Are muddy boots a bad sign in the cricket farming world?
You got it. Imagine you're a cricket farmer, and you visit another farm down the road. You could unknowingly pick up some nasty bacteria or pathogens on your boots, right?
Right.
And then you walk right into your own rearing pens, potentially spreading disease to your entire stock.
Oh, wow. I never would have considered that. Talk about bringing your work home with you. So what's the solution? Do cricket farmers need like hazmat suits and those shoe covering things?
Not quite hazmat suits, but you're on the right track. The manual stresses designated footwear for the farm, along with strategically placed foot baths filled with disinfectant. It's all about minimizing the risk of contamination through simple yet effective hygiene practices.
So it's like stepping into a surgical room. But for crickets, it all makes sense now. But what happens if, despite all these precautions, a cricket still gets sick? Is there a tiny cricket hospital they go to?
You'd think so, right? But unfortunately, the manual is pretty upfront about the limited treatment options available for sick crickets. Often the best course of action is quick removal and disposal to prevent the spread of any potential disease.
So no tiny stethoscopes or miniature thermometers?
Not that I'm aware of, but the manual does highlight specific signs of illness for farmers to watch for. Things like lethargy, loss of appetite, discoloration, early detection is key. And those meticulous records we talked about earlier, well, they become absolutely crucial for tracking any potential outbreaks and containing the issue.
So in a way, those records are like the cricket farm's early warning system.
Exactly, it's all connected. From choosing the right location to recognizing a sick cricket, this manual goes above and beyond simply providing instructions. It's about creating a sustainable, ethical, and safe food system from the ground up. And that's pretty remarkable, if you ask me.
I completely agree. It's eye-opening to see how much care and attention to detail goes into every step of the process. Okay, so we've covered biosecurity and disease prevention. But what about the actual cleaning products used on a cricket farm? Are we talking some super intense industrial strength stuff?
You might be surprised to learn that the manual is actually quite cautious when it comes to using chemicals. You know, these crickets are ultimately destined for dinner plates, so any substance used on the farm needs to be food safe and used responsibly.
Right, of course. So no bleach baths for these little guys.
Definitely not. The manual is very specific about that. It emphasizes using only chemicals that are approved for use in food production, and only in the manner outlined in the manual. It also stresses the importance of proper storage, to avoid contamination or accidental exposure.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's reassuring to know that there's such an emphasis on safety at every stage. Reading this manual, it's clear that sustainable cricket farming is about so much more than just, raising crickets. It requires careful thought planning and a deep understanding of the entire ecosystem.
You're absolutely right. This manual is essentially a blueprint for building a more responsible and sustainable food system. It challenges us to rethink traditional farming practices and consider the impact our choices have on the environment and our health.
This deep dive has been filled with so many aha moments. Who knew there was so much to learn about cricket farming?
What's amazing is that we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore, like the economic potential of cricket farming, especially for small-scale farmers, or even the culinary possibilities of incorporating crickets into different cuisines.
You're right. This manual has given us a fantastic foundation, but the conversation is far from over.
Hmm, maybe we need to schedule a follow-up deep dive in the future. Who knows? Maybe one day cricket flour pancakes will be as common as a bowl of cereal.
And don't forget the cricket frass fertilizer. You'll have the greenest thumb in the neighborhood.
That's right. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But we hope this inspires you to learn more about this fascinating and increasingly important industry.